why we're here. Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming on a beautiful spring morning here in Washington, D.C., and I'm proud to be joined by my colleagues, Senator Cantwell and Markey, and Senator Menendez will be joining us shortly. Now, during President Trump's campaign, he promised middle-class families and those trying to get to the middle class that he understood the problems they were facing and their burdens that, quote, he alone can fix. Instead, he came into office, and what we've witnessed is a president who time and time again has chosen to side with the wealthiest Americans and the biggest corporations at the expense of the middle-class families of this country. We've seen a president who, rather than work with Democrats in Congress to help the middle class, takes unilateral, reckless, partisan, and often not thought-out actions that actually do more harm than good to the very people he promised to help. And sometimes it's the actions he doesn't take that do the most harm. Case in point, the soaring gas prices in this country and the president's tax law. Let me explain. According to energy analysts and experts, President Trump's reckless decision to pull out of the Iran deal has led to higher oil prices. These higher oil prices are translating directly to soaring gas prices, something we know disproportionately hurts middle and lower income people, since a larger chunk of their disposable income goes for gasoline. Meanwhile, the president's tax law, which he promised would be a middle-class miracle, has been a boon to corporate executives and wealthy shareholders, particularly the big oil companies. Middle-class families are getting hit in the pocketbook, while oil companies rake in billions in profit, with a huge tax giveaway on top. Now the rising gas prices will, as one economist put it, roughly cancel out the 2018 consumption boost from tax cuts, and is particularly large on the lower end of the income spectrum. Let me say that again. The gas prices will roughly cancel out the 2018 consumption boost from tax cuts. That's right. Whatever meager benefit working families might have seen from Trump's tax scam for the rich is being wiped out by the gas prices that President Trump is responsible for. Fortunately, as my colleagues will explain, President Trump can take action today to help alleviate the pain at the pump for Americans. It's time for this president to stand up to OPEC on behalf of the forgotten man and woman he promised to remember. He's pallying around with the Saudis and UAE and all these other oil-rich countries. Why doesn't he ask them to lower their prices so that the prices at the pump can be lower? We haven't heard a peep from him on this subject. It's time for the president to buck his oil executive buddies who cash in when oil prices are high and stand up for working Americans. And remember, this is the same president who tweeted multiple times that President Obama was to blame for rising gas prices. So what is he going to do now that he's in charge? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. At least so far. Unfortunately, President Trump and his administration are clearly committed to helping pad the pocket of corporate executives and wealthy shareholders. They get huge tax breaks. Do the consumers see any of those breaks at the pumps? Nada, none, zero. In fact, prices go up. Why don't they use their tax breaks instead of bonuses for their shareholders and wealthy corporate executives to lower the price of gasoline? Mr. President Trump. But, so, there might as well be a bright orange E for empty plastered to the top of President Trump's Twitter account to symbolize the empty rhetoric when it comes to actually making things better for the middle class. I hope, for the sake of the country, for the sake of average Americans, the president heeds our calls, takes responsibility for the damage he's done to the middle class, and takes immediate action to remedy this. Senator Cantwell. Oh, here, just in case you needed some proof. Final price of gas under Obama, $2.36. Current price for gas under Trump, $2.92. Mr. President, you can't blame this on President Obama as you try to blame everything on him. It's time for you to act.
Thank you, Leader Schumer. It's great to be here with my colleagues, Senator Markey and Senator Menendez, who will be joining us. This weekend is the start of the summer driving season, and the average American household will pay $167 more in fuel costs this year. $167 more in fuel costs this year. According to the AAA, average gas prices in my state are currently the third highest in the country at $3.40, and in some parts are closer to $4. What we know is that gas prices have gone up 25% since the tax law went into effect. So as families are facing 3 times higher the cost, these corporations have gotten some of the largest tax breaks in our history. 4 of the largest U.S. companies got $15 billion in a corporate tax cut. 7 of the biggest oil companies got $13 billion in new stock buybacks. And yet, American consumers are facing $3 to maybe $4 of gas price in the very near future. That's sticker shock to the American family. What they're seeing could get worse, and that is why we are calling on President Trump to act. We do not want to see the price of oil get more expensive as we go into the summer driving season. We know that it is higher, 60 cents higher in a gallon than last year, and we know that the effect of this on the consumer, on the driving public, but also on our businesses that depend on transport. So many of the sectors of moving product around the Northwest are about transportation systems, and making those products more expensive challenges our economy. So we know that world crude oil prices have increased 75% in the last year, and that's because an agreement between OPEC and non-OPEC countries like Russia to decrease their oil production. The American people want to know what the president plans to do about this. Today, my colleagues and I are signing a letter calling on the president to pressure OPEC to increase world oil supplies, help lower the price at the pump, and save the consumer during their most expensive time, the summer driving season, where they'd rather be taking vacations and preserving their businesses and economic opportunities. I guarantee you what they got in the tax break just got washed away in higher fuel prices.
Thank you, Leader Schumer. Thank you, Ranking Member Cantwell. Thank you for your great leadership on this issue. Gas prices are up nearly 25% since President Trump took office. That means American consumers are paying more than $350 per year more to fill up than under President Obama. Donald Trump loves having names on things. Towers, steak, universities. Now his name is associated with the highest gas prices for American families that we have seen in years. President Trump's incoherent foreign policy has been exacerbating the geopolitical risk premium on oil prices and driving them up. And President Trump's decision to withdraw the United States from the Iran deal is further roiling the oil markets of the world. Because of these actions, that increase is going to increase the risk around the world that gas prices could keep going higher all summer long. I call this the Trump oil risk tax, and its impacts are being felt right now. The oil risk tax completely wipes out any tax savings from the Republican tax scam for the poorest Americans. The lowest 40% of earners are projected to get roughly $200 this year from the GOP tax plan. That is eliminated by the $350 more that they are going to pay each year to gas up thanks to Donald Trump's policies. President Trump likes to tout American energy dominance, but thanks to his policies, it is high gasoline prices that are dominating Americans' pocketbooks. The Trump oil risk tax is worsened by the historic levels of American crude oil that we are exporting abroad. We are now exporting more than 2.5 million barrels of oil a day of U.S. crude, even while we import that exact same amount, 2.5 million barrels of oil a day from OPEC and the Middle East. And we are sending our oil overseas to benefit foreign nations like China, which is getting a quarter of the United States oil exports. Why would we send our oil overseas instead of keeping it here while Americans get tipped upside down at the pump, having money shaken out of their pockets to fill their gasoline tax? Because big oil stands to see $500 billion in new revenue over the next 20 years as a result of U.S. oil exports, because they can charge more overseas. And in response to the millions of barrels of oil, of U.S. oil that we're exporting, OPEC and Russia and other nations are working together to simply cut their production by an equal amount. You don't need to be Robert Mueller to know that collusion is going on between Russia and OPEC to boost prices, and Donald Trump is doing nothing about it. And that is why I will be introducing the OPEC Accountability Act. This legislation would require President Trump to negotiate with OPEC, Russia, and other nations to put an end to this cartel manipulating markets and harming American consumers. It would further direct our trade representative to take action against any country in the cartel that refuses to stop conspiring to raise prices. President Trump says his agenda is America first, but the policies he and the Republicans are pursuing are putting big oil, OPEC, and Russia and China first, and the American consumer last. It is time for that to end. Let me now turn and recognize the ranking member of the Foreign Relations Committee, Bob Menendez of New Jersey.
Thank you, Senator Markey. From a foreign policy perspective that affects oil prices and therefore gas prices, it's pretty well known that geopolitical instability drives oil prices around the world higher and higher. And the Trump's administration's chaotic approach to foreign policy not only serve to increase instability and uncertainty around the world, and certainly as a result of that turn the driving of oil prices up a reality. While the president claims to have great relationships with the leaders of some of the world's largest oil-producing countries in the Gulf, he has done nothing to pressure those countries to lift their cap on output. He has not even nominated an ambassador to Saudi Arabia to advocate on behalf of the American people. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia and Russia continue to coordinate on cutting down the supply of oil and making prices higher for American families. Rather than seek to promote stability in American interests, the Trump administration has no strategy for pursuing a diplomatic solution to the crisis in Yemen and Syria, conflicts which drive instability in oil markets and prices higher. Mexico continues to be a top supplier of oil to the United States, but the president seems fit only to criticize their leaders, insult their people, and promote a wide range of antagonistic policies. And domestically, at the same time, Republicans are proposing to take away health care, slash the social safety net for middle-class families, but they've created a massive welfare system for big oil. You see it in the billions of dollars of tax subsidies that have gone to Exxon, BP, and Shell, some of the most profitable corporations in the world. You see it in the limitations on companies' liabilities when an oil spill occurs. You see it in the Trump administration's plan to auction off 94% of our coastal waters to oil companies for drilling. And so I've introduced, along with others, legislation to counteract every one of those corporate giveaways, and yet the Republican majority refuses to act. And you see it most recently that the corporate welfare stake is at work in the GOP's tax scam. All you have to look at is the beneficiaries of the tax bill to know where their priorities lie. So enough is enough. We're going to continue to fight in the Senate to make big oil pay their fair share. We need engagement from the White House on a global stage to create greater supply. and therefore bring down the cost of gas and oil, and therefore gas. We need to stop the artificially high prices, which is what's happening here by the downward production. We need the president to use the trade representative. We need him to engage with our so-called allies and those who affect OPEC and say it's time to start producing again. Very briefly, consecuencia de lo cual el líder de los demócratas, el senador Schumer y mis colegas estamos aquí, es porque el precio de gasolina sigue subiendo y subiendo y subiendo, y la realidad es por consecuencia en gran parte de la política del presidente, tanto aquí en los Estados Unidos como en la falta de una estabilidad mundialmente, donde el costo del petróleo sigue aumentando por esos países que no están produciendo a propósito para que el costo del petróleo y de esa forma el costo de gasolina sigue subiendo. Queremos que él interviene con nuestros aliados para parar esa realidad.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Questions on this subject?
Senator, how much role does any president really have?
How much?
How much role does any president really have on the price of gas at the pump?
If the president wants to take action, he can, and in two ways. One, OPEC. He's very, very tight with the Crown Prince. He's very, very tight with the head of UAE. Very, very tight, supposedly, with Putin. Well, why doesn't he use that for the American people instead of some of the things he's pressuring them with? And second, the big oil companies. They get a huge tax break. Well, they kept claiming the tax break's going to be good for the average American. A classic way to do it right now is tell those oil companies, jawbone them. Don't keep raising your price. You just got a huge tax break. You're making huge profits.
Senator Schumer, aren't there some benefits to higher gas prices? People drive less, create less carbon pollution, and also it makes renewable fuels more competitive and gas is more expensive?
Yeah, it shouldn't come out of the back of middle-class families, okay? Certainly, I think every one of us is for raising the mileage standards, which the president's opposing. We're for making things more efficient and having less CO2 go into the atmosphere, but he doesn't do any of that, which he lets the middle class suffer. I'm staying on this subject first. No, I talked to him about China and ZTE and China trade at length. That was the whole subject. Yes.
Republicans have endorsed price gouging legislation in the past when it comes to gas. Are you sensing that could be a reality this time?
Unfortunately, our Republican colleagues hardly act on their own. We need President Trump's leadership here. If he were to lead, they would follow. Well, mostly the president has the cards, and that's why we're pressuring him to do what he's doing. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. You did.